Okay, let's just jump right in. In an operation that has absolutely stunned the world, the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, was just seized by U.S. Special Forces. I mean, one minute he's in the presidential palace, the next, he's in a New York courtroom. His country is on a knife's edge, and we're going to break down how a sitting president became a prisoner.
And those were his own words. I'm a president and prisoner of war. That's what Maduro himself said as he faced the judge for the very first time. I mean, talk about a defiant statement. It just perfectly captures the high drama and, honestly, the completely unprecedented nature of this whole situation.
So you've got to be asking, how on earth did this even happen? How does a sitting head of state get taken from his own presidential compound and flown to the U.S. to face criminal charges? It sounds like something out of a movie. To really get our heads around this, we've got to look at the timeline of the operation itself.
And what's just wild here is the sheer speed of it all. Think about this. It all kicks off on a Saturday, with U.S. Special Forces grabbing President Maduro and his wife from their compound in Caracas. By Monday afternoon, just 2 days later, he's already in a New York court. And then, by that same evening, back in Venezuela, a new interim president is being sworn in. The pace of this is it's breathtaking.
And you can only imagine the scene inside that courtroom. It was incredibly tense. Reporters there said they could actually hear the clanking of leg shackles before Maduro even walked in. He apparently stood there, totally expressionless for most of it, while his wife, Celia Flores, well, she had visible bandages near her eyes and forehead. It just added this really personal, almost visceral element to the whole thing.
Okay, so this brings us to the big question, right? The central question, why? Why would the United States take such a radical and frankly risky step? Well, the Trump administration has laid out several reasons for this operation.
The official justification, as you might expect, has a few different angles. The White House is pointing to the migration crisis, right? And the flood of drugs like fentanyl coming into the U.S. But here's the most damning accusation. They're alleging that Maduro himself is the leader of the Cartel de los Soles, that's the Cartel of the Suns. It's a name for these corrupt Venezuelan officials who are supposedly deep into drug trafficking. The U.S. has even designated this group as a foreign terrorist organization, so they're not pulling any punches.
But of course, Maduro's side tells a completely different story. He has consistently, and very loudly, denied all of this. He says he's not a cartel leader and that the U.S. is just using the whole war on drugs thing as a smokescreen. The real goal, according to him, it's all about controlling Venezuela's massive oil reserves, which, just happen to be the largest proven reserves in the entire world.
And this perspective really shows you just how deep the international divide is on this. Not everyone is criticizing the U.S. action. Take Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the UK's Conservative Party. She did not mince words. She called Venezuela a gangster state and said the U.S. intervention was morally right to fight drug running and human trafficking. So, a very different take.
Okay, but while all the diplomats and politicians are arguing, what's actually happening on the ground in Caracas? For ordinary Venezuelans, the situation is immediate and it's incredibly tense. The fear is that with Maduro gone, the repression hasn't actually ended. In fact, it might be getting even worse.
And this creates this fascinating split reality. In public, on the streets, there's fear. You've got hooded men patrolling neighborhoods, military checkpoints popping up everywhere. People are even reportedly having their WhatsApp statuses checked by authorities. But then, behind closed doors, in private, a totally different story is unfolding. People are banging pots and pans from their windows, sharing images online, secretly celebrating Maduro's capture. And this quote from a student in Caracas really just brings that whole reality to life. Listen to this. Marcelo Veracruz told the BBC, "Inside our homes, yes, we are happy. I can assure you that over 80% of the country is happy for what happened. But for our own safety, we can't just go out and celebrate." I mean, that really says it all. Happy, but terrified to show.
And that fear he's talking about, it is absolutely well-founded. Just look at this number. 14. That's how many journalists were detained on Monday. In a single day. It's a pretty stark indicator of just how intense the crackdown on dissent and free expression has become.
Meanwhile, the remaining figures of the old regime are putting on a very clear show of strength. You've got the new interior minister, Diosdado Cabello, posing for photos with heavily armed security forces. They were even filmed chanting their motto, "Loyal always, traitors never." The message they're sending couldn't be clearer.
Now, this event hasn't just shaken up Venezuela. It has sent shockwaves across the entire globe. And it's created these really deep divisions among world powers. The international community is completely split on how to even react to this.
And this table really lays out those global fault lines perfectly. On one side, you have staunch supporters like the Venezuelan opposition, who are calling this a huge step for humanity. But then on the other side, you've got this chorus of really powerful critics. The UN human rights body says it undermined international law, France says it's counter to peaceful dispute resolution, and China just straight up calls the actions reckless. And then you've got some folks in the middle, like the UK Prime Minister, who are clearly trying to walk a very fine diplomatic line.
The UN's criticism is especially pointed, though. Their human rights body is arguing that the U.S. operation undermined a fundamental principle of international law. And this really gets to the heart of the whole debate. Does the situation inside Venezuela justify violating the sacred principle of national sovereignty? It's a huge question.
All right, so with Maduro in a U.S. jail cell, where does Venezuela go from here? The future of the entire country seems to now hinge on two key figures. Both are women, and they represent two completely different paths forward.
First up, you have Delcy Rodriguez. She was Maduro's right-hand woman, his vice president, and now she's been sworn in as the interim president. She definitely represents continuity with the old guard. In fact, one of her first acts was to praise Maduro as a hero.
But the opposition's response to her taking power was, well, it was immediate and absolute. The main opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, put it as bluntly as you can. Delcy Rodriguez can't be trusted. So for them, she is simply more of the same old thing.
So that brings us to the other key figure, Maria Corina Machado. And she's an incredibly compelling person. She's a Nobel Peace Prize winner who was literally barred from running against Maduro in the last election. She's been living in hiding and in exile, and now she has vowed to return to Venezuela as soon as she possibly can. And from her location in exile, she has been totally unequivocal in her support for the U.S. operation. She actually thanked President Trump directly for what she called his courageous vision, and she's declared that the freedom of Venezuela is near. So for many, she represents the hope for a total break from the past. Which leaves us with this final, really critical question. And get this, it doesn't come from a foreign critic, but from Chuck Schumer, the top Democrat in the U.S. Senate, right after he was briefed by the White House. An old regime may be shattered, but is the plan for what comes next actually solid? Or is it, as he put it, just vague, based on wishful thinking, and unsatisfying? That's the question hanging over everything right now.